Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development and Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. Before we move into today's lesson, let's make sure that we're on the same page. We've seen firsthand how much more is required to provide authentic leadership to a team than to simply manage based on the authority that comes with a title or a position. What we've learned through more than 50 combined years of leadership responsibility is that taking the extra steps to serve people and earn influence will always produce results that barking orders never will. And if you stick with us through the end of the episode, we'll share how you can get a complimentary trial to a resource we've built that's like nothing else you've ever seen. Now, with that in mind, let's get to work. This first episode is really continuing down the path in the series of profitability killers, and we're going to take a hard look at the fact that it all starts at the top. For more than 20 years, I've heard John Maxwell, who's been a mentor, he's been the education source for me throughout my career and so on. I've heard him emphasize that everything rises and falls on leadership. And I even remember a scene in the Spiderman movie that when our son was young, we had the DVD of it. We watched Spiderman and Uncle Ben got shot by the bad guy. And Uncle Ben's laying on the street and he realizes that Peter Parker, his nephew, is Spiderman. And he tells him at that point, with his dying breath, he says, with great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. Now, if we really want to have an impact on those things that are killing our profitability in the organizations we're responsible for, especially the ones that we looked at last time, those high-risk areas, and we want to achieve real, quantifiable, measurable results, I can't think of a better way to start hashing out the specific profitability killers than really looking at a top-down approach. How can we start at the top and make sure it cascades and we get the best bang for our buck in every aspect of our organization? So I'll start with sharing that I found an article on Forbes a while back. It was called Ineffective Leadership and the Devastating Individual and Organizational Consequences. And that article opened by saying this. It said, have you ever been so stressed at the thought of continuing to work with an ineffective leader, a bad boss, if you will, that you became physically ill? If so, you're not alone, the article went on to say. And it went on to say, let's examine the consequences and potential solutions. So after detailing a whole bunch of stuff about how much poor leadership can make really everybody's life just suck through the process. And that author went on to provide a lot of statistical data that backed their claims. They made a statement that said, in addition to the individual outcomes, it also leads to organizational issues of lost productivity, employee absenteeism, safety issues, turnover, and increased healthcare costs. Now, let's be honest here. Somebody running an organization, somebody running their company, they don't even have to care about the people who work for them to see just how much profit they're losing once they've sifted through enough articles like that. Again, I'll stress the areas they talked about. They said lost productivity, employee absenteeism, safety issues, turnover, increased healthcare costs. All those are impacting that bottom line. It's killing profitability. Now, I'm sure we could both make a long list of names that come to mind of folks that we've interacted with throughout our careers who didn't give the slightest bit of attention to what John shared about everything rises and falls on leadership, or what Uncle Ben told Peter Parker about, gosh, with great power comes great responsibility. But they certainly would break down walls for a couple of extra nickels. We've worked for those business owners, we've worked with managers, we've reported, we've known them, the folks that are looking for, how do I save a dime, not can I help people? And that's okay, as long as they understand how much of an impact they can have through that leadership. Now, in complete transparency, I believe there's a ton of things that can be done at every single level of an organization that can have a significant impact on any given profitability killer. The ones that are referenced in that article, the ones that we'll be looking through as we move forward, and we'll go into a bunch of those individually soon, but we'll never see the full benefit of any if we're not willing to start at the top. Now, I'll share Maxwell's wisdom once more again, where he said, everything rises and falls on leadership. I don't want you to miss that. Now, and let's be honest here, an owner of a company or maybe even the folks in the C-suite, they won't necessarily touch every single area of the business that needs this kind of attention on any given day. It's just not going to happen. They do indeed, though, set the tone for everybody throughout the organization that reports to them, and what they place a priority on becomes the focus that their direct reports will really look at, and that continues down the line. It cascades through the organization. So if we really want a great return from accepting that great responsibility that Uncle Ben said, that comes that we get with that great power. If we want that great return from accepting that great responsibility, it's going to be critical for us to make sure that we're providing a top-down leadership model. So that's what I really want to dig through. That's the examples that we're going to work through today in this lesson. So the author of that Forbes article that I referenced, they continued, given more supporting data. They provided a little bit more. The article itself, I think it was called "It All Starts at the Top." They cited a Gallup report that was called "The State of the American Manager," and they shared a quote that said 1 in 2 employees has quit their job because of a bad manager at some point in their career. It went on to say 70% are thinking about and or actively looking for a new job due to lack of support and recognition. So in Leadership Gold, a number of years ago, John put that book together. He makes a similar point. He says some sources estimate that as many as 65% of people leaving organizations do so because of their manager. The company doesn't do anything negative to those people. People do. He goes on to say sometimes coworkers cause the problems that prompt people to leave, but often the people who alienate employees are their direct supervisors. Gosh, just a week or so ago, I'm working with a large local organization, and their HR VP made that same comment to a group of a dozen or so leaders in the room with us, that's the importance of really building those relationships, because the supervisors and the managers often have a high degree of impact on whether people stay with the organization or not. True story. Now, with each of those statements, each of those really do point kind of back to retention, right? And that's something that we're going to unpack in quite a bit of detail very, very, very soon in a lesson like this. Both should serve, though, as eye-openers to the overall effects that poor leadership can have throughout our entire organization. Now, another article I found, it was called 6 Ways Poor Leadership Impacts Your Business. And it makes this statement early on. It says, poor leadership is a huge liability. The actions of a poor leader lead not only to missed targets, but can destroy the entire culture of a company. Now, the author of that article, again, it was called 6 Ways Poor Leadership Impacts Your Business. They went on to share the following 5, and yes, you heard me right, 5 ways that you can see poor leadership impacting a business. And those 5, I'm stressing that because it's really funny, those 5 ways in the article called the 6 Ways Poor Leadership Impacts Your Business were loss of motivation to work, poor sales performance, lack of ownership and transparency, mismanaged resources, and poor work culture. Now, for what it's worth, I read through that article several different times just to make sure I'm not miscounting it. They had it bullet pointed 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but I still kept going through. Did I miss that secret one somewhere that he referenced 6? Never could find it. Here nor there, I suppose. I guess you don't need to really be able to count to 6 to be able to write articles, but that's okay. The point's strong. What I did pull from the article, in going through those several different points, was that each of them have a real financial impact on an organization. Unfortunately, each can be difficult to quantify. And even when they are, the proverbial finger nearly always doesn't get pointed to, it almost always gets pointed to some cause that's not called leadership. And as I've said before, gosh, it's so much easier to place blame on a thing than it is to do that pesky thing called accepting personal responsibility. When Cindy and I deliver in person, we're together, especially when we talk about communication styles and applying the DISC model of human behavior. Cindy has a part in the slide where she says, it's your responsibility. And I said, whoa, guys, I apologize for my wife swearing. That's the whole personal responsibility thing. In society, it tends to be a swear word now. For now, what I want to do is make a case with you that's not tied to any one of those things, any one of those 5, or even the ones that we're going to break down in specific detail later on, but more about how poor leadership at the top of an organization in any one of these areas can set the tone for what occurs at every other level of that organization. The trickle-down effect, if you will, can make a small issue at the executive level exponentially more expensive, more costly by the time it impacts a frontline employee. And if nothing else, the numbers are just so much greater. But even the smallest issue, what I've seen over the years, it tends to grow as it's passed down from level to level to level within the organization, within the company. If the owner does it a little bit, that tells the person, hey, their direct report, the manager, it's okay for me to do it a little bit more maybe. And maybe the supervisor reporting to that manager, they feel like, hey, maybe I can push the envelope a little bit more yet. And by the time it hits so many of the frontline employees that are really carrying the torch, gosh, where are we at with our standards, right? And that's how important it is to really look at that from the top down. So what I want you to consider right now is how much direct and ongoing attention did any of those 5 things that are referenced before need? How much attention, how much focus, how many times did they have to be talked about or browbeat somebody under the best leader that you've ever worked with? Now I want you to think about how about the worst? How much under the worst leader you've ever worked with? How much attention did loss of motivation, poor sales performance, lack of ownership and transparency, mismanaged resources, poor work culture? How much did that need under the worst leader that you've ever worked with? And my guess is you and I are on the same page. I doubt your answers are very, very different from mine, because under the best leaders, those things don't need much attention. Under bad leaders, they need a lot of attention, and they cost us a lot of profitability, right? So a simplified translation of Luke chapter 16, verse 10 says, whoever can be trusted with small things can also be trusted with big things. Now, when it comes to top-down leadership, and how those high risk areas that we looked at before can kill our profitability, we're rarely dealing with anything small at that point. Usually, even if it seems small, it impacts a lot of folks when we're at the top of the organization. That said, I believe the things that as executive leaders in our organizations, these things we'll need to do. We're going to need to do this to address any of those issues. They're much simpler. The things that we need to do are much simpler than we often believe they are. And we can often overestimate the complexity when we're in that role and we understand that we carry that much responsibility. So one thing you're never going to hear me say is that leadership is easy, especially the kind of leadership that's really necessary to effectively run a large organization. What you will, though, hear me say from time to time is that it's actually pretty damn hard. In fact, I referenced John Maxwell a couple times earlier. I've heard him say that he's got a book scheduled to be released. It's already written, he says. I'm not sure it's true. I think he jokes about this, but he says it's already published, it's already written, everything's already done. It just won't hit the bookshelves, the stands, until he dies. It's called Leadership Sucks. Now, don't misunderstand me here or the title of his book in thinking that I'm suggesting that leadership is complicated or it's difficult. Neither are true. I don't think that's the case. I say leadership is hard, not because of that painstakingly complex work that's involved, because it's not, but because ensuring that we're the best example for the people that count on us, that can be a heavy burden. That can be tough for us to carry, and that's where the hard comes into play. When we truly care for those people, and I don't believe we should ever accept a role leading others if we don't truly care for them, the level of responsibility is high. Now, if we want to make an exponential impact as we work to address the things that are really killing our profitability, we need to recognize that every action we take to exemplify what I'm going to say is genuine servant leadership to our teams, it's going to carry on from the top down. It's going to really set the tone. And when we invest the time into how we communicate with our teams individually or as a group, the leaders reporting to us, they've got a clear example to follow, right? When we're intentional about being responsive with the folks that need our time and attention, regardless of how tough it might be to provide that time for them on any given day, it serves as a solid example, a great demonstration for how they need to do the same thing for the people that they're responsible for leading. And when we show our team members that we've always got their best interests at heart, not only are they more likely to be incredibly engaged, but they're rarely going to consider going to work somewhere else when they know they've got that kind of leader that they're reporting to, right? Now, while none of these things that I've just mentioned require fancy credentials or following these complex, detailed procedures, they're most certainly things that we're going to need to weave into what's likely already a really, really heavy workload in that leadership role. And that's where it can get pretty tricky. Now, on any given day, we're going to face pressure to choose the task that's demanding our attention right then and there, or are we going to give that individual the time when they need our ear? And as a high-level manager, an executive, or even a business owner, there is never going to be a shortage of issues that are really demanding us to be hands-on, right? But if we don't balance those tasks, those things saying, hey, you need to do me right now, with a heavy dose of time for the people around us, we can expect to see that trickle down. That effect is going to be carried over with every other leader in the organization. If they see we're prioritizing tasks over our people, so are the other leaders in our organization. They're going to follow suit. That's the example we're going to set, and we're going to see it cascade, and we're going to see that be exponential. Now, if every new level of leadership responsibility, if somebody in that is about, if each new level of leadership responsibility that someone accepts really boils down to the money that they're going to get when they take it, there's never going to be enough money to make it worth what it's going to take to really earn that authentic influence and the buy-in from the teams around us. That said, when we focus on the impact that we can have on each individual, instead of the perks that might come our way with the job that we accept, we can build a culture that really thrives and provides rewards that can't be had in any other way. And here's what I'll say. A lot of people ask, well, gosh, that sounds really hard to earn that kind of genuine leadership influence and so on. And I'm going to say, heck yes, it's hard. Absolutely. But if we're being honest, having a crap culture where the best we can ever hope for from somebody is they hit mediocrity and they're not really looking to exceed expectations, well, my goodness, great people aren't looking to be part of that. And that becomes pretty stinking hard to be part of that culture too, right? At least when we're willing to engage in the hard, but extremely simple steps that are required to lead well to really earn that influence, the results pay off over time. And unfortunately, this really requires many folks in the highest levels of leadership to change how they view things.
Thanks for listening to the Leading at the Next Level podcast. Next time, we'll pick up where we left off by digging into the importance of changing our approach. If you'd like to go deeper into anything that we've shared with you here, or you need continuing education credits for your professional credential, send us an email at admin@dove-development.net, and we'll be happy to hook you up with a 45-day all-access trial to our complete Leading at the Next Level program at no cost. The full program includes access to well over 100 hours of digital lessons, complete with slides and action-based assessments to help you capture measurable bottom-line improvements in your organization, and 2 live lessons each month with Q&A so we can help you identify the specific action steps you want to take to lead your team more effectively.